This was the closest I've been to facing death, and I hope it's the closest I get for a few more decades. Having lived through it, I can now say this to you with a bit more certainty than when death was a useful but purely intellectual concept. No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet, death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it. And that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It's life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, the new is you. But someday, not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. Sorry to be so dramatic, but it's quite true. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary.
Everyone, to a very special live broadcast of What's Trending, of course, in honor of the incredible, the iconic, the visionary Steve Jobs. All of us around the world were notified of his passing yesterday on Apple.com when they put up a message that he had passed away. He, of course, had suffered cancer for the past 7 years. And after that was announced, there was an outpouring, an overwhelming outpouring of thoughts, support, emotion from around the world. And we here at What's Trending have obviously been inspired by Steve Jobs as an individual, by his work. And we thought, you know, at 10 p.m. last night, this is such a special moment to come together and celebrate the life of an icon. And so we put this all together, this live stream. We have some special guests in studio right now. Dave Matthews, who's a tech guru. He's a broadcaster, an entrepreneur here in Los Angeles. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
We have Dana Bernetti, who is one of the producers of The Social Network and also president of Trigger Street Productions. Thank you for being here. Melissa Junrally, who you might all remember from our What's Trending show. She's our social media correspondent. And Raymond Roker, who's the founder of Herb.com.
Herb Magazine.
Herb Magazine.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here. But we will also be joined over Skype by influencers and experts from around the country who will be sharing their stories and thoughts of Steve Jobs. I'm speaking of everyone from Robert Scoble, Chris Pirillo, Veronica Belmont, Ben Parr, the editor-at-large at Mashable, and many, many more. So for the next hour, please join us, tune in, share your thoughts, tweet us at What's Trending, hashtag Thank You Steve. We'll be bringing you into the conversation. Join the chat room. We're at bit.ly/WTChill. And join this moment. This is a very special moment in time. We're all witnessing history here, and it's definitely a celebration. We're also going to be showing classic, iconic videos that we've discovered on the web to celebrate Steve Jobs. And of course, the one you saw when we opened the show was of his 2005 Stanford commencement speech, which, as we all know, has been linked to by everyone from around the world. Now, I know we're going to be going to Robert Scoble in a bit, but first off, let's talk about where everyone was when they heard of Steve Jobs passing and how they've been sharing their thoughts. Dana?
I was leaving a meeting at Fox Studios, driving out the gate, and had on AM radio as I heard they announced it. And then I stopped Mike DeLuca, who was behind me, and had him come up next to me and told him. But yeah, it was a bit surreal, and I don't think you really realize how much he had an effect on your life until you heard that he died. And what I found interesting about it, though, is we knew that he was going to pass soon.
Yeah.
So I was like, look how much it affected everybody, even knowing that it was coming soon. But if it was unexpected, I can't imagine how the reaction would have been.
Oh, definitely. And it's funny because this is the first time we've met in person. We've seen each other on Twitter. But I was intrigued to have you here because you were really sharing a lot online yesterday. Why did you think that was important? And what were some of the things that really struck you in terms of what you were sharing and what you saw?
Well, I mean, everybody here, we're all on Macs. You're touching things that he
Yeah.
invented. He changed everybody's lives, whether they realize it or not, if you use a Mac or even if you don't use a Mac. He influenced a lot of what you do, how you conduct your business, how you communicate. He was an amazing person that the more it resonated with me last night as I was on Twitter and reading everything and going back and watching videos. It's just like, wow, he was our Edison, and as a lot of people have said, he was Houdini. He was it all rolled up into one.
And you never met him, but you did exchange emails with him.
Yeah,
Can you tell
not
us
one of my
about
brighter
that?
moments, but and that's what's so amazing too. The guy was, billion-dollar corporation, and I heard that he had this email that was sjobs@apple or sjobs@mac.com, and that he responded. And it was when the cinema displays first came out, was my first exchange with him. And I gotten one, and 3 pixels were out on it, and it drove me crazy when I was editing or doing work on it. And so I emailed him about it, and kind of in frustration and ranting about this.
Did you expect anything?
No, I was just kind of sending it off into cyberspace, into the ether, never thinking I was going to get anything back. And I got a reply, but it was a couple weeks later, and it's Dana, sorry, I've been busy just getting through emails.
No way.
I'm going to have somebody contact you from professional support, or I forgot what the division was called. And they contacted me and took care of it. And then another time it was a bitch about copy and paste, not the iPhone not having.
Did you always have to, send those critical emails? You can be like, I just really love all this.
Yeah, no, well, people tend to only focus on the problems usually, but yeah, those weren't my brighter moments, but it was, of course, bonding with him. But it was impressive the fact that he was so hands-on to, just anybody, and he would reply and handle the problem.
Yeah, and if you're wondering what I'm looking at, I'm listening to everyone here. I'm following your hashtags. Thank you, Steve. One of the most retweeted ones, of course, started the whole hashtag from Schwarzenegger, who wrote, Steve lives the California dream every day of his life, and he changed the world and inspired all of us. And so we'll be continuing to take your tweets throughout the next hour. I know Raymond. Oh, actually, we're going to go to Scoble right now, who's joining us.
Scobalizer?
Yes, Scobalizer, joining us over Skype right now. Is Scoble there?
Yes.
Hi, Scoble. Thanks so much for coming so last minute. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.
And now, I was following you on Google Plus yesterday when this all was happening. Did you just happen to be there, or did you head over there after you heard of the news?
I was driving on a freeway near the Apple campus when I heard the news, and so I was probably about 10 minutes away from the campus.
Wow.
And, I got there before most of the press did, and just watched as employees left and stuff like that.
And now, also, can you describe what the energy was like at that point, what the scene was? You were taking some incredible pictures.
The employees were quiet, and they usually wait outside for their buses home. So it was time to go home, and there was I took pictures of rows of employees just sitting there staring into their iPhones and just quiet, just not talking, not joking the way that they would usually joke, or be having animated discussions about what they were working on with their coworkers. They were just very quiet and subdued, and that's what I remember.
You've been covering this scene for years. You're such a known icon yourself in this space. Tell me about what you remember of Steve and your memories.
Oh, the one memory I remember is when he announced the iMac, which is what I'm talking into right now, and he told me back of the computer, look at how beautiful it is, and look at the engineering that went into making the solid metal shell. I'll try to show it to you. Behind the computer, and he's the only CEO who's ever told me to look at the back of a product. And
did you get to meet him? Did you actually meet him?
Several times.
Wow.
This was at an official press announcement for the iMac. I met him in the street. I know Steve Wozniak much better. I actually studied every morning in community college with Woz. So Woz told me a whole bunch of stories, and I worked with Daniel Lewin at Microsoft, who was the co-founder of Next with Steve, and he would come in my office and tell me all sorts of Steve stories. And I've had lots of people who've worked for him. Last night I was hanging out with people who used to work directly for Steve, and they were telling stories. And everybody has a story. I mean, if you go to Buck's, one of the restaurants near Woodside, which is where all the venture capitalists hang out, Jameis, the guy who runs the restaurant, used to be his first contractor. And he told me stories of fighting with Steve about staples in the garage. Steve wanted everything to be perfect. And, he's like, dude, it's a wire in your garage. Who cares about how it looks? But they would have fights about that. And that is Steve. He wants things to be beautiful and to be completely done. Not done for the front or for where the guests are going to come in your house. He wanted it to be done in the garage. And that's I keep hearing that kind of story over and over again when I talk to people who've been around Steve or worked with Steve or in my own personal experiences with him.
What impact did he have, do you feel, on other industries like Ford and Edison? I know you've spoken about that.
Well, when I've gone to Oakley, for instance, whose sunglasses, they study great design, and they specifically mention Apple. They say Apple does the best design, so the people who are making sunglasses are studying what Apple does. I watched a show on BMW, and they said they study Apple and their approach to design. So this approach to being complete and building a holistic product, gets repeated throughout other industries, and the stories of meeting Steve and discussing design and understanding what he's doing are legend.
What was he like as a man to you, as a person? I mean, could you get a sense of who he was?
If you talk to people in the 80s about him, the word asshole was used a lot more. I mean, when I first met Steve Wozniak, it was the day after the Next came out, and I asked Woz, what do you think about Next? He goes, I learned not to say anything if I can't say something nice.
Yeah.
So, and we forget he's a mercurial manager. His CTO told me that if he called you on the phone, it's like God calling you on the phone, and it randomizes what you're doing. It's like Steve Jobs just told me to do something, I better do it, and that messes with your head and messes with the organization. And lots of people have those kinds of stories about, man, he was really a pain to work with or hard to work with.
Yeah.
But most of the people, when they say that, they also say, but he got the best work out of me that anybody's ever gotten out of me. And so even the people who didn't quite like the process at the time, in hindsight, say he was the best that they'd worked with in their careers.
Well, Robert, you're in Cupertino, California. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all your stories. I really appreciate it. At Scobalizer on Twitter, and I know you're sharing everything on Google Plus right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That whole obsessing about products, he took it to a whole nother level. I remember I bought my first Mac, a Cube, which was like a Kleenex box computer.
I still have one.
You still have one? Yeah, beautiful design. And the power supply for that looked better than a toaster that you would buy. It's just amazing what detail he went into with everything, a holistic product.
Yeah, so Dave, I know you know the products very well and the timeline. Can you go over some of the most memorable Apple product timeline?
So I grew up with a CPM computer, which was, every computer was a little bit different back in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And I remember going to see the founder of my computer, Adam Osborne, at a computer store. And next to Adam Osborne, who's this tall, statuesque man, I see this Apple Lisa. And it was a $20,000 computer.
$20,000. What year was this?
This was in 1984, 85 probably. And my computer at the time was $1,700, and that included all software. So here this Lisa is. And it had this graphical user interface, which Steve Jobs had an early look at this from Xerox PARC Labs. He saw this new way to compute. And Wozniak said, when people see this way of using Windows versus, at the time, the Apple II was just a linear text-based operating system where you can only do one thing at a time. Wozniak said, as soon as Jobs saw this, he brought as many of his team over to Xerox PARC and knew that this was going to change the way we use computers.
It's incredible. And he actually studied, calligraphy in school, which he mentioned at Stanford speech.
I think what people, as Robert was saying, what people gravitated to so much about Steve Jobs is that he was a scientist with an artist's vision.
He said he mixed in technology and liberal arts, which I found so beautiful.
And when you think about it, he made technology go away. And when the iPod, as a tech guy, I really didn't like how it synced everything and it would only let me marry the music with one computer. But for the masses, it made it simple. It made it brilliant.
Kids, 5-year-olds can pick this up and use it. They're intuitive to, you see YouTube videos of kids playing with iPods.
Yeah, they're changing the way people interact with technology.
Generations underneath us are never going to have to use buttons again.
Well,
everything is going to be touch screens.
More than changing, I think it's more than changing the way people interact. I think it's actually getting back to the natural way you would have interacted. I think the mouse was kind of a necessary component of how computer technology was evolving, but truly, we would have just touched things and moved them as we wanted to. And kids are doing it how a basic human would have done it.
We actually have another friend, Amber Mack, over Skype right now from Toronto. How are you?
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Oh, thanks for coming by. So I have to ask you, where were you when this all happened, and what was your first reaction?
Like many people, I first heard on Twitter, so I was following my Twitter stream and everybody was talking about it. And then within a couple minutes, I got a call from a TV station that I work for in Toronto asking me to do a live video chat. Of course, they asked me to do it over FaceTime, so just that whole experience of setting up my MacBook Air, watching as my 2-year-old son was on his iPad, calling the TV station on my iPhone, and seeing how much all of Steve Jobs' technology has really been integrated into my life, from my personal life to my business life, and all of the products through my home. I mean, it was just a really sad moment, and still is.
Looking back, what are you going to remember about Steve Jobs?
I think the thing that I will remember the most about Steve Jobs, and many of you have touched on this already, is how accessible and how easy he has made technology. When I watch my 2-year-old play Angry Birds or go onto YouTube, I mean, it's a fascinating experience. He in turn then goes up to the television in our living room and tries to press on it and touch it, and then walks away.
Yeah.
Because he's so frustrated. He doesn't understand that device. That device is useless to him. So he will grow up, and there are a generation of people who will grow up, kids today, who are so used to that type of technology and welcome that technology into their lives. So it's had a huge impact for everyone and for families, from toddlers all the way up to grandparents.
Are you surprised at the global online reaction? Like, what have been some of the reactions that have stood out for you?
I'm not really that surprised that there has been such a huge reaction to Steve Jobs. I mean, he's been known worldwide for so many years, for decades, really, and his devices are some of the best technology devices for people in all corners of the world. So it wasn't a huge surprise. I mean, I think it's just nice to see the amazing support, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook or other places online, and really the tributes that people are doing towards Steve Jobs, and what a wonderful impact he's had on all of our lives.
Were you surprised that this happened a day after the big Apple announcement, which I'm sure you were part of covering?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a difficult thing for many people. You know, I had spent Monday and Tuesday really immersed in the announcement from Apple, a little bit disappointed about the iPhone 4S, expecting more, and then the next day just getting this horrible news. I mean, it was a surprise that it had happened so quickly. I mean, even though many of us knew, and I know you guys have talked about this, I think we all expected and hoped that Steve Jobs would hold on. There was a way that, you know, he would be able to fight this, just how he's faced so many other battles and won so many other times in his life. And so it was just so disappointing to hear the news, to hear what happened. And, you know, I'm just thankful for having a chance to use all of the technology that he created. And I look forward to continuing to use it in my business and my personal life too.
Amber, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
you.
Sure. And now we're going to throw to another video of Steve Jobs that I'm sure you'll all want to share with your friends. Take a look.
Crazy ones. The misfits. The rebels. The troublemakers. The round pegs in the square holes. The ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
That, of course, was the famous and iconic Think Different ad commercial, which came out in 1997, and that will just stand the test of time. I mean, that video constantly inspires me.
Have you seen the tribute to that video, which uses Steve Jobs? Like, who knew with all those people that influenced him and his creativity, he would then go back, and the ones that were still alive, obviously, influence our creativity, which is amazing.
Well, yeah, speaking of that, Raymond, you actually posted a Huffington Post article today about it all. Tell us what you shared.
Well, I wrote something last night that I guess has been inside me for a long time, just in the sense of talking about my influence for starting my magazine 20 years ago, and what the platform, what the technology of the Apple computer brought to me. As a, you know, I was a designer, I was a graphic artist, but I was not at all versed in technology, and I'd really kind of glossed over all of that in college, and was starting this magazine with a partner of mine, and the Apple computer was literally the doorway to everything that came after it. And I felt that the brand, just the way it was presented to me, the way the tools worked for me, said everything about you know, my creativity, and it pushed me forward. And I really just know that that foundation was something that was nothing I could have found anywhere else. Yeah. And you know, so I look back, and for over the years we published in the magazine, we'd shout out Apple. We would always say we were dedicated, you know, Apple users, and we only use Macs. And so, like everybody else, when he passed, even though we were aware that he was sick and we knew that he wouldn't go on forever, it just all came kind of rushing back, and I said, wow, you know, this really was as important as one of those, you know, rare pillars in life.
In addition to him being such an iconic entrepreneur and inventor, I mean, I think he really inspired so many people in his arena, and consumers as well, to just keep pushing forward. Yeah. There's a tweet that I'd like to share with you guys. It's from Jonathan Moss at JW Moss. He tweeted this, and it was retweeted about 100 times so far. He said, Steve Jobs was born out of wedlock, put up for adoption at birth, dropped out of college, then changed the world. What's your excuse? Wow. So please, you know, we'd like to continue the conversation on Twitter. You can go to our Facebook at facebook.com/whatstrending and tweet us with the hashtag #ThankYouSteve or hashtag WTLive. Yeah, and for there's a blog post out there that is pretty amazing on allthingsd.com. I suggest all of you go and read it, of course, after the live stream, but from Walt Mossberg, who is the co-founder of All Things D, and he wrote about his experiences of meeting Steve Jobs and hanging out with him and being with him while he was sick, and the stories are just incredible. It's amazing that he had such access. I was lucky enough through my media connections to be actually in the room with him, and I put up some of my favorite pictures on my Flickr page, and you can get to that through at @GGDM on Twitter. But for Walt to have such access and really tell the human story, that's the only human story that I've seen about Jobs, because, you know, we can all admire him from afar, but it seems like he had some really wonderful access. And Woz has had some nice comments as well from when they were starting their career. But my favorite story overall is so many great innovators have dropped out of college, but only Steve Jobs dropped back into college. I know, yeah, and the thing, he goes, yeah, I was a dropout, but then I went back. Yeah, he just hung out, went and looked at calligraphy and mathematics and just things that interest him. And I think that's amazing that he had the gumption and the balls to go do that. That was great. He got this world experience and then applied that when he went back to further his education. Yeah, he spoke a lot about curiosity and to be using that to drive you for more. And now we're actually going to go to the editor-at-large of Mashable, Ben Parr, who's joining us right now from San Francisco, California. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Shira.
Hi. So tell me, you guys have been covering this obviously nonstop. Tell me what you're seeing in terms of coverage, how you guys have handled this story.
Well, we've been, it's just tough. When we first learned about this, it was just shocking. Actually, I learned about it not from Twitter and not from Facebook or anything. I actually got a call from my mother while I was driving.
I think we got disconnected from him. We lost him, but we will be reconnecting. This is the magic of going live like this. But we were talking about, there's been some incredible blogs out there and coverage happening. And it's really amazing to see everyone sharing their stories. Jason Fried, of course, who's the founder of Ruby on Rails, wrote a great blog post as well today that I suggest everyone check out. And I know that Ben Parr is now back, so let's reconnect with him. He changed his. I appreciate your patience, everyone out there, and thank you, Ben, for coming back. So yes, you were sharing where you were when this all happened.
All right, let's go try that, and let's hope that computers don't break down on me. My mother actually gave me a call while I was walking up the steps. That's how I found out about it. Got a call on my iPhone about the whole thing. Is like my mom, who's not into technology at all, was even following what was happening with Steve. His impact is just legendary.
And what was your reaction when you first heard it? Was it something that you were obviously surprised about? What did you do right after that?
The first thing I did was open the laptop. As a journalist, my instinct is like I had to get on. I had to find out what happened, was true, get writing, get stories. The honest truth is I didn't have that much time to really reflect on it until later that night and really reflect on what had happened. But it was just an outpouring. It took down Twitter. It took down multiple different websites. Front pages of every single website I visited was dedicated to Steve Jobs.
What are your reflections on it right now?
Well, I will have more on that as I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times, but it's Steve. I consider him one of the world's greatest innovators. He was an innovator. He was an entrepreneur. He was an inventor, but most of all, he was a world changer, and he changed the world for the better. He made the world more accessible and did things with computers that sparked multiple different revolutions in technology, not just one. He even sparked a revolution in entertainment with Pixar. When he was bored, he sparked yet another revolution. It was what he was good at. And we're all better for it because of it.
What was he like then meeting him? Share a story. Tell me about it.
Well, I think the most prominent one would be AntennaGate, and I was one of the ones invited to AntennaGate press conference, and that was a different side because most of the time when you're at a Steve Jobs press conference, he's completely in control. It's here's this awesome product, here's the magical thing, here's the new iPhone 4, it's amazing. AntennaGate was different. They called a press conference 2 days before, and we came down, and I was surprised just how calm he was, but yet how poignant he was. He was very, very, very adamant about how much he cared about users, how much he cared about the experience they had and wanted to make every single one of them happy. One of the things he said at that press conference was, we care about every user, and we're not going to stop until every one of them is happy. And I think that's the kind of thing that drove Steve Jobs and drove who he was as a person, what he wanted to accomplish. He wanted to make everybody happy with the products he built. He wanted to build the perfect product.
What did it feel like being in a room with someone like him?
I'm not worthy.
Yeah.
To be in a room with him, he was the center of attention. I mean, I didn't have the chance to know him earlier in life, as some of my colleagues have. But when you were in a room, he was clearly the center of the room, the center of attention. And he earned that. He earned that right to be the center of your attention. And he did that with masterful performances on stage, but most of all, he did that by his passion. You could tell whenever he was on stage, he really, really loved the products that he was talking about. He really, really loved the iPhone 4 and was really loved its users and was sad and disheartened when they were not happy with certain aspects. Wasn't going to back down on what he and his team had designed, and he wasn't going to do something like a recall.
What have been some of the online reactions you have seen that have really stood out for you?
I think you see it all across. I think you've seen a lot of people change their profile pictures. I've seen a lot. I've been invited to maybe 20 different Facebook events for different vigils, different meetups, different like Turtleneck Day apparently is Friday.
Yeah, Friday Turtleneck Day, everyone.
There's a whole bunch of that. And then there's also reaction from people of all walks of life, political candidates, the President of the United States, business leaders, economic leaders, world leaders. These reactions are pouring in from all over. It's you understand just how important he was to society based on the reaction alone, and you can only hope to achieve a fraction of what he has done and achieve a fraction of the reaction that he elicited last night.
Just finally, as a journalist, where do you predict the company going from here?
The company will be just fine. The company has this roadmap for years to come. But like any company, it has to evolve and change. If they start saying, what would Steve Jobs do? They're going to fail. But they're going to be a titan for years to come. They're at their peak now. And the one thing I do want to say is that there has never been an empire in the history of the world that has lasted through the ages. Empires rise and fall all the time. There will be a time when Apple's sun slowly sets, or when Apple cedes a spotlight to a different company. But you can bet that its impact on thousands of people, millions of people, thousands of companies all across the world will be felt for generations to come.
Thank you, Ben, so much for being here today. I appreciate it. And right now we're going to go to another clip of Steve Jobs. This is a clip of him, Mac Speaks, and it's really showing how much of a visionary he is. Back in 1984, take a look.
I'd like to let Macintosh speak for itself.
Hello, I am Macintosh. It sure is great to get out of that bag. Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, I'd like to share with you a maxim I thought of the first time I met an IBM mainframe. Never trust a computer you can't read. Obviously I can talk, but right now I'd like to sit back and listen. So it is with considerable pride that I introduce a man who's been like a father to me, Steve Jobs.
Welcome back to our What's Trending special in honor of Steve Jobs. We've been talking to friends and experts and influencers over Skype from around the country, sharing their memories of Steve. And we also have some great in-studio guests as well. We have Dave Matthews, who's a great tech broadcaster and entrepreneur. We have Dana Brunetti, who some of you might know as producer of Social Network and president of Trigger Street Productions, and Raymond Roker, who is the founder of Magazine. So thank you for joining us. And of course, our social media correspondent, Melissa Giunrelli. And we actually have some comments coming in from you. Keep them coming. Of course, tweet us at What's Trending, hashtag thank you, Steve. We want to hear from you. And some of the articles and blogs that we talk about in the show, we'll also be tweeting them through our at What's Trending account. So look out for that.
Yeah, so, you know, something that I was noticing last night when watching all the tweets was just the scope of the different kinds of people that are talking about the death of Steve Jobs. I mean, it ranged from not just people in our little tech bubble, but politicians, celebrities, journalists, food trucks, stores. And one of the tweets really that struck me was from the Grammys, just in talking about the way that Steve Jobs changed the music industry. They tweeted last night using the hashtags, thank you, Steve Jobs. Thank you for revolutionizing the way we listen to music. Your vision will not be forgotten.
That's pretty remarkable when you think about it.
Yeah. He changed the music industry in a lot of ways.
Well, he not only changed it, but he won them over in time, you know, because initially it wasn't like that.
Post-Napster.
Well, he was always about digital disruption, or not even digital, disruption in general. What can you do? How can you challenge?
There was a time before, I mean, people, you lose sight of about paradigm shifts once you go past them, right? You can't think back, but You know, my magazine covered music for 20 years, and there was the pre-iPod phase of covering music, and then there was the post-iPod phase. Pre-iPod phase, everything was compartmentalized and siloed, and you bought one collection of music, and that's what you followed. Yeah, maybe you had a few things in other areas, but once the iPod came along, it allowed you to really, truly delve into what your music personality was, and you really had that full collection, and you could tap into any source of music inspiration at any point. Before that, it was so hard to kind of be that.
Also, content creation, as an independent content creator, he made it so easy to produce.
Yeah,
right.
Well, go from what he did with the music industry, started there, but then once it went to the iPhones with video, and I remember doing a panel at Sundance in 2004, and I held up a Trio before the iPhone was out, and I said, eventually you'll be watching movies on your phone, and everyone in there laughed, and like, I'll never watch a movie on a phone. And how many downloads on iTunes? And granted, Apple TV and iPad are a little bit different, but I see a lot of people watching movies on their iPhone. So he changed just not only how you listen and watch films, but production as well. Final Cut. It revolutionized our industry. It used to all just be Avid, and they had the lock, and that was the majority of what people used. Final Cut came out, and then iMovie, and then he started putting it on every computer that came out, and gave people the ability to take their cheap digital camera, plug it in, and be able to make a movie. Now you can do it on your phone, and I don't think without Steve that wouldn't be where it's at today.
Not to mention social media. I mean, he really elevated social media as this forum where we can all communicate on a regular basis. If you look at all the apps that were created as a result
and whole
of this,
industry,
instead of talking on the phone, we can just have fun talking through apps to one another.
And we haven't seen what will come of this too, with Twitter integration in the new iPhone 5. I've got a beta version running on one of my phones, and it's pretty cool how Twitter is integrated into the phone operating system.
Yeah, when you take a photo, it's tweet, it's right there. You can email it or save
it and tweet it.
Yeah.
Change the behavior. So now we're actually going to head over to Drew Olenoff, who writes for the nextweb.com. Who's joining us. Drew, that's a pretty great look you have going on there.
Yes, this is in memory of Steve Jobs, who taught us to not only think different, but be different. So, I mean, he's inspired all of us, obviously, and yesterday and today and forevermore will be sad.
You have an interesting angle to this because you've really been such an advocate and leader in this space, for the cancer community. And so what did this all mean to you?
Well, I mean, the form of cancer that Steve Jobs had, which is pancreatic cancer, is not only one that is extremely aggressive, but has an extremely, limited survival rate. And the fact that he stared pancreatic cancer in the face, got treatment, and went on to do as many great things as he did is a testament to his willpower and a testament to, how far we've come with medicine. And not only that, though, how far we have to go still. This is Steve Jobs, the most powerful man in the world, and had the most money and was able to get as much technology as he wanted, and he still, didn't completely beat it, but he won. He won his battle for sure.
He will continue and live on in spirit and with everything we use on a daily basis. Where were you when you found out about his death?
Yeah, I mean, this is a story that I'll tell my kids when I have them one day. I was interviewing, now that I'm a journalist with the Next Web, I was interviewing the CEO of iPhone app called Alfred, which is, recommendation stuff. And we were talking, and it was a great interview. And we both got pinged nearly at the same time about Steve Jobs passing. And of course, we both, we were on video Skype and both looked at each other and said, this we're done here, and noted that this interview, that application, his company would not have been made possible if it were not for Steve Jobs. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people who have similar stories. I mean, I met my fiance, Melissa, because I worked in LA for a company called Goji, who had an iPhone app. If they didn't do that, I wouldn't have been there and I wouldn't have met her. There's a lot of stories like that if we just take a couple minutes to think about.
In the Valley right now?
The sentiment is, you know, with a situation like this, we thought we knew something about his health. He kept it private, wanted to keep it private, and that's his business to keep it private, absolutely. But there was a sentiment that his health was failing, and of course, when he stepped down as CEO, that was the case. But, you know, the sentiment in the Valley is an amazing leader, an amazing thought leader, an amazing technology enthusiast is lost. But here's the thing. Steve Jobs was so brilliant and is so brilliant. Technology had to catch up to his mind. There's a video posted, I don't know if you shared it, where it showed, you know, the Apple Assistant, and there was a video display, and, you know, it would, you know, the assistant would tell you when your calendar schedule, you know, what was coming up on your calendar schedule. He predicted all of this, built his way and the company's way to create this. He wanted smaller phones and smarter phones. Technology had to catch up to him. And that doesn't happen very often.
No, it only happens with people who are visionaries, and he definitely was one. Now, also being part of, you know, cancer is a huge part of this, and you're a leader in this space as a survivor. How is social media connecting with that right now?
Well, I wrote Steve Jobs an email a year after I was, you know, clear of cancer, and I thanked him and I told him how important the iPhone was to me. You know, I would sit in the chair getting chemo, and I would tweet with people, and people would send me, you know, encouragement and blaming my cancer and such. And, you know, I never intended on posting that email, but I posted it last night, and I won't share whether he responded or not. But that email, I just wanted to tell him how important his technology was to me. And I think there's a lot of people saying that too, you know, where, you know, with computers and video chats like this, seeing people face to face, you know, maybe Apple didn't invent all of this technology, but they made it easy for people to use. My mom has an iPad. My mom made an iPad cover. My mom gets excited when a new iPhone comes out. They made, you know, they made products that were easy to use. I watched Louis Gray's children, and his son, who's 18 months old, and he uses an iPad. He swipes and he watches a video, and that's amazing.
Well, Drew, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. We'll be following you online.
Thank you for doing this, guys.
Thank you. He, of course, is at Drew Allenoff on Twitter. And now we're going to be actually taking a look at a clip from Anderson Cooper 360 last night on CNN. It was actually this morning on CNN where Steve Wozniak shared his thoughts on Steve Jobs' passing.
Well, tell us what he was like as a young man, like as a teenager, and how he managed to accomplish all that he did in life.
Yeah, I mean, he was fun. He was interested in music. He was interested in words and what they meant, like poetry as guides for life, kind of like searching Eastern religions and searching for religion in popular songs of the day. He was knowledgeable about technology and really believed in that as his big future, that was the thing he was meant to do. And he was just always trying to think ahead of somebody else and look at the newest little building parts and what could you make with those, and thinking in terms of how they'd affect society. A great visionary and leader, and it was hard to recognize when he's young. He's like a lot of young people, and a lot of them are great visionaries and really don't go that far. But companies have ways of hiring that they wouldn't even hire somebody without a college degree.
That, of course, was Steve Wozniak today on CNN, who was, you know, Steve Jobs' partner in crime, and to hear those stories. You know, obviously, this is, everyone is so emotional about this, but it's also important to celebrate, and there's so much to celebrate. You know, we wish we could have had Justine here today, Justine Ezerek, who, you know, a lot of her career was inspired by Steve Jobs. She, you know, the I in Justine was because of Steve. She unfortunately, you know, it was too hard for her to come here today and to even talk publicly about it. But she even became a Google trend today because of how many people were talking about her in relation to Steve Jobs.
And she broke her career with her YouTube video about her 3,000-page phone bill. So that was back when AT&T was just trying to figure out how they're going to talk about the way data, and that's changed the whole mobile industry. Now data is surpassing voice in America and developed worlds because of the iPhone. And one of the things that I like to talk about, based upon what we just heard, where technology had to wait for Steve Jobs. The iPhone was an afterthought. Really, the iPad came first, and in the lab, the digitizer, which makes the touchscreen work on the iPad, was too expensive. So Steve said to his team, give this to me in a phone form factor.
Wow.
And he took the size of the Trio, which was a popular cube or square, and turned that into what became the iPhone. So he, being such a visionary, just as a way to cut costs, created a whole new industry unbeknownst to him.
That's incredible. Now we actually also have Veronica Belmont joining us right now, at Veronica on Twitter. Hi, Veronica.
Hi, how are you?
We're great. We're sharing so many incredible stories of Steve Jobs right now. Tell me some of yours and what you remember.
What I remember, well, I unfortunately never had the opportunity to meet Steve Jobs, but he absolutely shaped the entire tech industry as we know it today. No matter how you feel about Apple products, I mean, every gadget that we touch, you know, it has been shaped in some way by his vision, by the products that he's put out into the world.
And what reactions are you seeing today here in San Francisco?
I haven't actually left my house yet, but from what I've read online, I think the most interesting thing to me has been reading all the reactions from reporters and people who have spent a good amount of time with him. But it's more about those private stories that we never really heard about until yesterday and today, like from Walt Mossberg, which Dave mentioned, and also from someone like Brian Lamb of Gizmodo, who actually shared the conversations that he had with Steve Jobs over the iPhone 4 situation that happened last year. So hearing those stories for the very first time and seeing the reactions from people who have worked in the industry, I think has been very eye-opening.
As someone who's a technologist, tech reviewer, tell me how he changed the industry.
It's been interesting to watch because I think never before has there really been a company that tech journalists and tech reporters have so personally felt connected to in a lot of ways. I mean, the iPhone is something that almost every single tech reporter that I know, at least in San Francisco, uses as their personal device. I can think of maybe one or two people that I know day to day that don't use an iPhone. So it's really interesting to see the people who look at other products, who deal with other products. You know, at the end of the day, they go home and they use their MacBook Pros and they use their iPhones and their iPads, and I think that's very telling.
Where do you see Apple heading after something like this happening?
You know, as Ben said, I think they will be absolutely fine. Tim Cook has very capable hands, and I think he's going to lead the company into the future the way that Steve intended it to go. I mean, Steve is not the type of person that would not, you know, he knew he was sick. He has laid out a plan for Apple for probably the next decade, you know, as far as his vision would let him go. And I think they're going to be just fine.
Do you feel like we knew Steve Jobs as a person?
No. I don't think we did at all. I think his family knew him as a person. I think we can only speculate on what he really was like as a person. He was a private guy. Few people got to know the inner Steve Jobs, and I think that was part of his mystique and part of the reason he's so interesting.
Where were you when you found out about all of this?
I was actually driving home with my boyfriend, Ryan Block of Gadget, former editor of Engadget, and as well as Peter Rojas, his co-founder of Gadget. And all of a sudden, Ryan got a text message. It was actually a text message from an unknown number saying Steve Jobs has passed away. And we were all like, this can't be real. Like, is this a joke? Is this something, is someone playing a trick on us? And they both immediately hopped on Twitter and found that it was confirmed. And we were all just kind of in shock. It kind of blew us away because, as everyone knew, he was very ill. But I guess we always thought he had more time. Always thought there was going to be another year, another 6 months. And so it was surprising, not totally unexpected, but pretty shocking at the moment.
And did it affect the rest of your evening and day? Because I know a lot of people here, I mean, they either were with friends talking about it or they were online blogging.
I came home, I got right on the computer, and I probably drank about half a bottle of wine the second I got home, just because it's something I needed to kind of absorb for a little while. It was kind of a quiet evening, for sure.
Was it ironic, too, that we found out about his passing, a lot of us, through his devices?
Ironic? No, I think it is totally expected at this point. Totally appropriate. I think it's the way he would have wanted it.
Definitely. Well, Veronica, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So it's so great to see everyone really connecting over Skype. We've had, if you've been joining us on this What's Trending special live stream in honor of Steve Jobs. We've had everyone from Robert Scoble to then Parr Mashable, Veronica Belmont, Amber Mack, and more to come. We brought together some great people in less than 12 hours to join this discussion today.
It really was 12 hours when you called me last night.
It was less than 12 hours ago, so I appreciate your patience and all watching and all of you for joining. But right now, let's throw to another clip, and this is one of the iPod.
The field that we decided to do it in, the choice we made was music. Now, why music? Well, we love music, and it's always good to do something you love. More importantly, music's a part of everyone's life. Everyone. Music's been around forever. It will always be around. This is not a speculative market. And because it's a part of everyone's life, it's a very large target market all around the world. It knows no boundaries. But interestingly enough, in this whole new digital music revolution, there is no market leader. There are small companies like Creative and Sonic Blue, and then there's some large companies like Sony that haven't had a hit yet. They haven't found the recipe. No one has really found the recipe yet for digital music. And we think not only can we find the recipe, but we think the Apple brand is going to be fantastic because people trust the Apple brand to get their great digital electronics from.
Welcome back. That was, of course, Steve Jobs' iPod keynote. Always such an incredible presenter. Even if he was private, seemed kind of soft-spoken.
Makes you want to listen like E.F. Hutton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you listen to it, you hang on to his every word. And Walt, from All Things D, not to go back to that post again, but he said how once during the D conferences that they have, they had told him, you're not allowed slideshows, and he came with his slideshow, and they had to tell him, really, and even though he was like, okay, I'm not going to do it right before, they saw he was prepping his slides. And Walt had to go up to him, you know, you can't use the slides. And even though he tried to argue with him, he respected it and moved on, of course, had the best keynote presentation
one of the other
of
things
the day.
The archive pieces, or recent archive pieces, is his presentation to the city council in Cupertino about this new amazing building.
Let's call it a spaceship.
The spaceship, right? That'll be built, you know, posthumously. But it was amazing just watching him there, you know, bringing them along his vision. And in such a humble setting.
Well, we've been going live on chill.com, and we've been getting some great comments, so let's share those right now.
Who are sharing what Steve Jobs' presence has meant in their lives. And from BJ Tiny, he says, in the chill room, I remember as a teenager, our school got Apple computers. It was the greatest thing since we were too poor to get one for our home. So it just goes to show you how much of an effect Steve Jobs and his company have had on people across generations, you know, different economic classes across the board. And also, in addition to the tweets and videos that people have been posting, a lot of people have been sharing different meaningful quotes from Steve Jobs. One of my favorite that I think is very appropriate as we get ready to close the show is, being the richest man in the cemetery doesn't matter to me. Going to bed at night saying we've done something wonderful, that's what matters to me. And he said that in 1993.
Wow. That's incredible.
One thing that in contrast to this whole Occupy Wall Street that's going on right now, and I posted this last night, but did you ever think that the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation would have an effect on you like his death has? And in contrast to that, it's amazing because everyone seems to be against the big corporations and the people behind them, and he's one of the guys who is kind of like one of us in a weird kind of way where you would think that people wouldn't respect him as much as they do.
Apple's whole growth was during the first web downturn, 2001, when the iPod was announced. And again, in 2008, was the market shifted down, Apple kept innovating and brought us the iPad. So it just shows you that no matter what's happening outside, you can still innovate and drive within.
We have someone else over Skype, Eric Greenspan, who's actually started a whole Steve Jobs tribute page on Facebook, and he's going to be joining us momentarily. I know everyone's doing their own parts to share their stories, whether it be on their Facebook page or Google Plus or by blogging.
So there's one thing that I really want to talk about with, will Apple continue the presence that they've had before? And I think Steve Jobs, he was the ultimate editor. He knew when to remove things from products. He knew when to wait. And even though the iPhone has evolved many different times from when it first arrived, where it was not an app ecosystem, to now where it's this amazing ecosystem. But he was the first one to remove the parallel port and go with USB. Yeah. He was the one that integrated everything into one chassis with the iMac. He was the one that got rid of the floppy disk. Lately, he's gotten rid of the optical drive. So he takes the technology and makes the technology disappear. So now we can carry very small devices. I don't need my optical drive. I can really leverage the cloud, which is what is going to happen with the latest iPhone, and removing the cable. Yeah, getting rid of the keyboard.
He's
with
simplifying it. We actually have Eric Greenspan now over Skype. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Cher. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for making this work today. And now you started your own Steve Jobs tribute page. Tell me about that and what types of reactions you have seen.
Wow, it just really blew up. It was actually a friend of mine, ironically, that I met through checking in on Facebook on an iPhone at Starbucks. And he had me sit down and watch his MacBook while he went off and bought some coffee. And that's how we met. He started adding me as an admin, and next thing I knew, I started inviting my friends, and the thing just went nuts.
And so what types of reactions have you seen?
There's sadness, there's disappointment, there's concern over the future. There's one of the things I think that's the coolest, though, and certainly for me, is the inspiration. I woke up this morning fired up, and I was reading so many great things from so many people about how they're fired up, that Steve Jobs has led them down a path to create greatness, and continuing on in that is just something we have to do in his honor. And I think a lot of people are following in those footsteps right now.
How did Steve Jobs impact you?
Well, it's funny. I actually started my career as an IBMer. And back in the day, I was a holdout. I was a non-Mac guy. And I bought my first Mac only about a year ago, and I loaded Windows 7 on it. And I thought I was going to use Windows. And I used it for about an hour over the course of the year. And I am a complete convert now. And ironically, I was actually in the Apple store yesterday buying 3 iPads for the development of some electronic work orders for our company, when my brother showed me on his iPhone, Steve Jobs has died. And I thought it was some kind of silly joke. I looked around the Apple store, and you could see faces getting the news, and it was just really surreal. People were just finding out all over the place, little at a time, and they just kind of got quiet.
Now, what do you think his legacy has left and has impacted people, others around the world, who maybe might not be in technology or this industry?
Well, I mean, it's amazing. Let me tell you a great story. My little boy is 18 months old, and we went to his older brother's basketball game the other day, and he was just out of his mind. He wanted to run out in the middle of the court. So I pulled out my iPad, and ironically, I put on Toy Story from Pixar, stuck a set of Bose headphones on him, and he sat there for an hour and a half and didn't move. And I got to watch my older son play basketball. So talk about impact. I mean, it was right there.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining us today. And of course, where can people find that Steve Jobs tribute page?
If you go to facebook.com/Eric Greenspan, you can see it in my groups. And I'll be posting it throughout the day there in my status. So go ahead and join it, and we'll make sure you get accepted right away.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And now there's so many different pages being set up. There's even that the day tomorrow, the Black Turtleneck Day, right? Everyone's going to be doing that.
People can also show their respect and their celebration of Steve Jobs and his influence on them by adding a special twibbon to their avatar on Twitter or Facebook. I just came across it. If you go to twibbon.com/join/RIP-Steve-Jobs- you know what, I'll tweet that from our account.
What's Trending.
But if you go to twibbon.com, it should come up.
So yeah, we'll be sending that link through What's Trending, a way to get your own twibbon so your avatar includes a Steve Jobs tribute.
And Apple has an email address, which no telling what they're going to do with this,
Yeah.
but if you go to send an email to rememberingsteve@apple.com, hopefully it'll be the world's biggest and best, most beautifully produced card.
Nice crowdsourcing.
Definitely. It'll be interesting to see what they do with that. And now we have another tech guru, Chris Pirillo, here today. Hi, Chris.
Howdy.
Now, I know you went live right after this all happened. Where were you? How did you find out about it? What was your immediate reaction?
Well, I don't think it would come to anybody's surprise. I was in front of my computer, a Mac Pro that I've had for a number of years. I'm surrounded, of course, by iMacs, iPhones, MacBook Pros, MacBook Airs, iPads, and I was not always an Apple fan. But I caught the news as it scrolled by. The AP had tweeted breaking news, and immediately I caught a screenshot within a minute of it going live. And my first thought was, wow, this is likely real, but it could be one of those account hacks, since we all have known that those have been happening, specifically on Twitter, with rather alarming news. So I waited a bit, but shared it, and then had recognized that the wire had gone out, so figured it was official. And from there, of course, I'm on social media, as everybody was. Twitter exploded. Google Plus exploded. You couldn't look anywhere without seeing Steve's name and specifically this news. So immediately I did set up the YouTube live video feed, just like I had done the day before, to talk with my community about the announcements that Apple had rolled out.
Chris, we're just going to take a pause right now and reconnect because we can't see your video right now.
Oh, that's because Skype probably pushed it into HD.
Thank you for that. You're always informed and knowledgeable of your Skype disconnection issues. Oh, there we are reconnecting with him, because Chris Pirillo is definitely known in the tech scene. He's based in Seattle, and he covers everything tech and Apple.
Convert too. He used to be the Windows guy when we first met, Chris, so many years ago, right?
Yeah, the last two are recent.
Yeah, and please join in. I should have said, we've had so many great guests, and you guys could join in. It's not just about me asking Chris questions. When you saw that and when you went live, tell me about what that was like with the community and what you were seeing.
Honestly, I was shocked. I was expecting a lot more trollish behavior, but I think everybody was on their best behavior. And of course, there were a few who were misbehaving and being disrespectful. But by and large, I mean, and I think this came from the top down. We saw immediately announcements go out from Bill Gates, from the Google gang. In fact, Google changed their homepage, and I thought that was a class act. I mean, that just, so many followers of these big brands want to believe that it's a war, and it really isn't. You have to have mutual respect when you look to another company to be inspired and to give them inspiration, and that's how this industry really works. So I think I caught one of Steve Wozniak's hits in one of the various media outlets that he was doing or covering with this news, talking about, he'll remember where he was, and I've been struggling because people have said, well, he was like a JFK or like a Leonardo da Vinci, a Willy Wonka of sorts, and I think it's difficult to, find a contemporary, but, this is, I guess, if there was an illusion to be drawn, maybe this generation's John Lennon, to have inspired so many people, and we can still listen to John Lennon's music today, and certainly we will feel the influence that Steve Jobs had really given the world through his vision.
All right, quickly, what impact did Steve Jobs have on you, Chris?
Well, I mean, you name it, just like everybody else. I mean, it's interesting to talk about these stories, and I love it. I'm finding people who I had no idea even existed telling me how, Steve Jobs touched them, and they started their careers, and they're going into school doing this because of owning Apple's products. I only met Steve once. It was when I bought my first iMac at the Palo Alto store. It was just a happenstance that he was there. And I said, hi, I'm Chris Pirillo. I host Call for Help on Tech TV. He says, great, buy an iMac with a super drive. I was like, okay, I'll do that. But you can fast forward to today, and much like Drew was mentioning earlier, I met my girlfriend largely because of our mutual interest in Apple's products. She was searching for information on the iPhone, and then a while later, she was searching for information on a MacBook, and I happened to produce videos that she was entertained by, and now I entertain her personally. Like, I'm a jester at home.
All right, well, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your stories today about Apple, Steve Jobs, and connecting with your girlfriend. It gets that personal.
Yeah, it does.
It does get really personal. I just came across a really beautiful tweet. It's from @Vikster, Vicky. She tweeted, #thank you, Steve, for inventing the iPod and helping my Asperger's son overcome his crippling fear of thunderstorms with music.
Wow. There's so many of those. If you go to #thank you, Steve right now, and we've been checking that out throughout the show, of course. Also in the room, in the live stream, please chat with us. Go to bit.ly/WTChill. If you're just catching the end of this, don't worry, because it'll be repeating in the room throughout the day. And you're close with Mark Zuckerberg. He said some interesting thoughts. Well, you know Mark. You know Mark. He actually said some interesting things too. I thought on his Facebook page. Did you see anything significant?
Yeah, actually, he wrote. I have it here. Steve, thank you for being a mentor and a friend. Thanks for showing that what you build can change the world. I will miss you.
Yeah, and everyone.
Has 338,716 likes and 25,000
You can have
shares.
that many likes on Facebook.
He's Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah,
that's true.
The interesting thing about the Google guys, their dedication or tribute was that they said, and we're typing this on a MacBook Pro. They wrote that too, so it was very. That says a lot.
You're talking about the Edison of our time, right? He had 317 patents granted at the time that the New York Times did an amazing piece, and I tweeted about it @GGDM. You can look through this interactive UI element that they put together on New York Times website. So just, you don't get people doing that much innovation and creation. Now, granted, he had a whole team and this legacy that will live on at Apple. We'll carry the torch forward, but
you're like an Apple Steve Jobs.
No, that's why we had him. I said, Dave, please give us the timeline of the products, of everything that he released, and of course, Time magazine made him the cover story as of last night, which is an obvious one. So you can look out for that right now. Thank you so much to everyone for being here today. It's really been a pleasure. Dave Matthews, Dana Bernetti, Melissa June Rowley, Raymond Roker, and of course to all our great Skype guests, Robert Scoble, Veronica Belmont, Chris Perillo, Eric Greenspan, Amber Mack. I'm trying to think if I forgot any others.
Ben Parr.
And Ben Parr, editor-at-large at Mashable.com. And of course, all of you for joining this last-minute, very special discussion honoring the one and only Steve Jobs. I'll leave you with this clip, but first, this quote that everyone's been tweeting around the web that Steve Jobs had said, "There's no reason not to follow your heart. Stay hungry, stay foolish."
Love it.
Love it. And with that, we leave you with this last clip.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.